Okay, hello. This is part 2 of the online class for environments production for games. So in this one, I just want to talk a little bit about modularity and what it actually is, and why many video games at the moment are using it, and why it's a very popular way of constructing levels. The reason games use modular assets is because there's many benefits to do so. These include things such as the performance increases that you're going to get from the consoles or from the computer, because it's only having to render that one piece of geometry and then duplicate it, as opposed to rendering separate different pieces of geometry with separate textures all over them. The production time actually reduces. Now, the one thing that I will say about the modular workflow that you're going to be looking at is, firstly, it does take a little longer in the pre-production stage. So in a sort of planning and developing what it is we're going to build takes longer than if you just to kind of go out there and just start building it straight away. Having to look at things and understand how they can be built in a modular fashion takes a little bit of time. Once you've got past that sort of roadblock, the production time then for creating all of these assets speeds up dramatically. Okay. So games that have been using this sort of modular workflow for a long time are people like the guys at Epic. They've been using a modular workflow for quite a while, and it works really well for the games that they've been creating. So in their terms, Epic Games, they define modularity as modular design is concerned with making lots of high quality chunks of levels and reusing those chunks intelligently. Now, you'll understand what they mean by that a little more when we start going into this short presentation that I've got in front of us. But essentially, what they're saying is, can we produce really good quality, detailed pieces of modular buildings or cityscapes or whatever it might be? Can we produce them to a high detail, knowing that we can copy and paste them across the map, and then use clever lighting or the use of sort of props and things in order to hide the fact that they're copied and pasted across the map? That's the workflow. The word modular itself comes from the word module. Now, what you're doing right now is a module, right? Because you're doing a long course, a 2-year course, and it has a certain set of modules. It has 16 modules in it. Now, the word module, what it actually means, if you were to kind of look it up in the dictionary, is a set of standardized parts or independent units that can be used to construct a more complex structure, such as an item of furniture or building. So modular parts of a table, for example, that you would get from IKEA, that all end up coming together and building something much bigger. You're doing one module currently on this course called Environment Production for Games, and it leads into a bigger thing, which is the foundation degree in games art. So understanding that what a modular thing is very helpful. So in relation to games, what it means is modularity is about the creation of an asset that can be used and repeated straight across the entire map. Okay. There are some benefits to using modular workflow. So as modularity is a process of reusing the same high quality detailed asset, it means that a minimum of only one of those assets is needed in order for us to kind of duplicate it and have it across the entire level. If modularity isn't taken to such an extreme, so if you're not kind of building everything and you're seen as modular pieces, it is still faster to produce a modular level than it would be produce something made out of unique assets. If you are making just one room, then a modular workflow might not be the best thing for you. Building sections of a wall so that you can duplicate it to create the wall isn't time efficient whatsoever, you know. But you know, if you're building something that has you know, pillars or struts, or has these, you know, grand sort of pieces and iconic pieces that are going to be in there, like stairwells and all that sort of stuff, that you know it's going to take you a little bit of time to build, but the fact that you're going to place 2 or 3 of them in the room, it's worth doing. Okay. So one of the things that Epic Games also explains is that one major concern with making modular pieces is the fear that the player will be able to see the reuse of those chunks. This is a problem, and it's something that has to be sort of hidden by Epic suggests that you use lighting, that you use decals, that you put props in certain places, or that you use elevation in terms of you know, certain things are higher or lower than others. That throws off the human eye, and so we don't kind of look at something and say, hold on a minute, that's the same thing that I saw a minute ago over there, like 20 more times in this scene. So you have to be very careful about the way in which you kind of work around those things. So looking at this quick presentation, so modular design, you know, when you actually look at it, if you look at this, you know, set of buildings here, in the top right of that picture, there's all the buildings kind of flat out straight, right? They're just lying out there now. You can see here that they've created a little piece of wall that's fallen apart. You've got a column here, you've got another piece of wall in there, you've got a little archway in here, another column in there, which is actually the same column, it's just kind of reproduced. So this column that we can see reproducing all the way along is probably just one modular piece. It's this piece here, look. This one's slightly longer, so there's probably 1, 2. That one is a replication of this one. So you can see how creating these individual modular pieces will then allow you to, you know, reconstruct things in a way that you would like them to be used. So as stated on here, so when computer games strive for ever more detailed worlds, it is restricted by your hardware and time. Modular assets can be used to build the same level in less time and cause less stress on the game engine. Okay, so why would you use a modular workflow, and how do you use one? Well, basically, modular workflows make use of like one main texture sheet, and it's also known as a texture atlas. If you type in texture atlas into Google, you probably come up with hundreds of these sheets of, you know, 2048 or even bigger texture sheets that are just absolutely rammed full of small separate textures. Okay. We're going to talk about a texture atlas potentially in this video, more likely in the next. It uses lots of instancing. Instancing meaning that if I was to copy a set of stairs and move them to another side of the world, and then I've decided, oh, actually these stairs aren't quite right, I need to slightly change, you know, maybe the elevation of them or the angle of them or something like that, you know, the angle, the degree that they're kind of, you're having to walk up them because perhaps our player character isn't capable of walking up them because they're too steep or something like that. So if I had them as a copy, then when I change one, it wouldn't affect the other one. If I have them as instances, then whenever I change the first one or even the second one, whichever one I change, they're an instance. They're a carbon copy of each other. So anything that happens to one happens to the other. Think about it like it's almost like twinning. If you have twins, so if you do something to the first one, the second one feels that, and the same thing happens to that one. Okay. There's a lower memory footprint with modular building, and that's, like I said before, because your engine's only having to render that prefab once and then just copy and paste it. That's much easier than having to render individual assets. It requires much more planning and less production time. I mentioned that earlier, so I won't go over that again. And it uses less unique pieces, which means less work. That is key. You know, when you're walking around an environment, especially in video games, you probably kind of be eye candy drawn towards one kind of key, you know, unique piece, like a fountain in the middle of a courtyard or something like that. That fountain, that piece there, that's a unique piece. It might not be found anywhere else in the game, or if it is, it's found much later on. So those unique pieces are designed to kind of draw you towards them. Having to make less of those things because the rest of your buildings are all modularly built means that there's less work for you, and also that in certain parts of your game you can have these little spots of sort of, beauty looks, looking at these beautiful pieces. Why would you want a modular environment? Well, it's easier to create. There's more ideas and variations. You can chop and change your buildings or whatever it is that you're designing much faster. So if you have one set of windows or one set of doors or one set of walls and pillars and things, it's much harder then for you to duplicate those without them looking like you've only got one set of them, right? Whereas if you took the time to, when you were building, let's say, look at this one as an example. These columns here are identical here and here and here, right? There's no denying that. They're absolutely identical. These top sections here are identical as well, all of them. So these are just snapped into place next to the columns. This section along here, running across the top, this bit is not quite identical to all the ones running across, but it's similar, okay? So what we're looking at here is we can see the bit that's highlighted in blue, that is a unique piece, and that is a modular piece that we can see hasn't been replicated elsewhere. This one's got two little fans inside it, but it could be. So we could grab this and we can put it here. So it would look like there's two buildings that have these fans in. So this building as a whole would change from something that has sort of office sort of areas over here and somewhere that needs some kind of extraction in here and much larger extraction or air conditioning in this side over here. And all it is swapping out, these modular pieces, and you can recreate this building very, very quickly. You could remove this garage and you could put this section here over here. So then this building looks a little bit more dull. It looks like it doesn't have an area to park a van or a truck or a car or whatever it might be. Or you could remove this section here and put that one there as well, in which case it doesn't have a door, in which case when you look at this building, you think, well, that's the side of it. The front must be somewhere else. There's no door, there's no garage, there's no nothing. So really quickly, you can rebuild these things. And we're not saying that we can stop there. Like the fact that this building ends here just means that we can grab another one of these columns. And we can perhaps take this section here, place it again on top, and then you've got a 3-story building. And you're building all of that stuff really, really fast, okay? And yeah, it's taking you some time to build these individual building blocks, right? You're going to take the time to make your Lego before you can build whatever it is you want to build out of your Lego. I think that's the easiest way of explaining modular. I've just come up with that. I think it's brilliant. Time, polys, and texture can all be used really wisely. That's fairly obvious. So what makes up a modular environment? Well, two things make up a modular environment. Or at least a modular building. A texture atlas. So we can see over here on the left-hand side, this is a texture atlas, and I'm going to go into that in a little more detail in a second. And the 3D models, and over here we can see the 3D models that have been created. Put those two things together and you get a result, right? Now this one that we're looking at right here, this is from a student from the first year of the course, Kieran Hutchison, now working for Viewpoint Games on a virtual reality game for Oculus and for Sony's Morpheus. It's a little go-kart game. Now he was very, very good at breaking down his environment and saying, right, I want to be able to create one of these lovely buildings I can see in Leamington Spa in the town centre. And I can see that they've got these little balconies on. All the balcony rooftops are the same. All of the balcony sort of struts that are coming down the sides and the railings for them are all exactly the same. So I only need to build one of each of those, right? Then I can see that I've got maybe 2 or 3 different types of window that I need to design. So I've got ones that have got shutters down and I can't see in them. I've got ones that are open, but it's got these nice little detail running across the top. And then I've got ones that are completely open and exposed. I've then got different windows that have a slightly different tone to them as well. They've got like a darker inlay. So I'm going to have to build those ones. I'm also going to have to build the ones that have got the shutters on the outsides as well. These pieces here, these kind of draw dropping nice beautiful pillars that we've created, they're only going to be created every now and then, but in which case I'm still going to need to create them. So I'm going to need the detail for the pillars that runs along the inside there. That's it here, by the way. And then maybe we've got the odd one sign that's kind of, he's going to hang in front of the door. Here's a door just here. We could have like 5, 6, 7, 8 of these different doors on different texture atlases that we could use in order so that the entire street aren't all using blue/grey doors. So the texture atlas, and again, I'm going to go into the texture atlas stuff in much more detail. I'm going to show you how to set up Photoshop and how to start designing the texture atlas in the next video. But that will show you, this shows you here how we can put together really simple environment using very few textures. Here we are not seeing, I think we've got a little bit of the walls here. So this texture here is there. This lined texture is the only one that I can't see on here at the moment, so there must be a second texture sheet for that. You can see the coving or the sort of detailed sections of our walls are here, and then we've got the sort of this section here is the top of your rooftops. We've got the windows that are in there as well, and you can see where all of this is kind of joined together. There's your separate windows there. These sections just here are the shutters that we've got on the sides. So you can see how it all just basically kind of pops together. Okay. So wouldn't everything just look copied and pasted? Well, yeah, things can look copied and pasted, and it is quite important that if you are building something that's a little bigger, then you make sure that you have either unique props put in there. That will help you out a little bit with making sure that things don't look exactly the same all the way around, or you use lighting in a way that allows you to give the illusion that the corridor is not made up of the same pieces as well. So if you can see over here on the left hand side, it's very clear to see that these sections here are exactly the same. These pillars are the same. Every other one's got one of these lights hanging from it. These top sections here, they're the same from there to there, is the same from there to there, from there to there, to there. So there are parts in this that are identical. Okay, and if you were to just let someone run around in this environment like this, they may or may not notice too much that things are copied and pasted. But if you start adding in unique bits of geometry, if you start putting lights on every other piece, if you add in the odd turny wheel at different points along the corridor, and you light the area slightly differently, so some parts are lighter and other parts aren't, then you can get away with it. And that's the key. That's the thing that we're looking for, and that's the thing that I want to be seeing in your work. So the only other way of reproducing something and not having it being really obvious is to use height to give a unique feeling. So the walls and the floor can be the same mesh in both areas. The light can add some difference along with props and things. However, the areas can read completely differently because of height as well. And if a player changes his height, or he moves up and looks down on something, or moves down and looks up on something, being able to see similar looking walls and paths and floors and things, but not quite seeing them from that same elevation each time, can be a little bit confusing for the player, but not confusing in the way of, oh, I don't really know what's going on here. Confusing as in they won't notice. Okay. So let's move on. Setting up Photoshop for a modular workflow is quite simple. I'm going to go through this in actual slow-mo detail in the next video with you, but essentially you're creating a new document, whether that be a 2048 or a 1024. You're going to your edit, preferences, guides, and grid slices, and you're going to change those properties so that they're using a certain setup that will allow for us to have nice grid slices placed into the scene. Whenever you want to turn on or turn off grid slices, you just do Control and the little I've forgotten the word for it. this little option here. Okay. 3ds Max also needs a setup as well. Now the setup for 3ds Max I'm going to show you again in a little bit more detail later on. We can see here how things start being created and split up, and why we're going to use this modular workflow and this texture atlas in more detail later on. Okay. This is what we're going to end up with, also what you guys are going to end up with, is a modular flow. You want to have your sort of building blocks, your Lego ready for us to create anything that you want to create. Okay, so that ends our talk on modularity and why we use a modular workflow and why you guys are going to be using a modular workflow. So I'm just going to stop this video here, and in the next one we'll be looking at Photoshop and how to set up Photoshop for a modular workflow. Okay.